Welcome back. I hope you had a great weekend, and it was a little busy for me. So this will be the first video for Monday. I know that some of you probably saw my Monday live stream or Friday live stream, I believe it was. So, for the time being, I am going to focus a bit more on writing when I can, just because I think it's a little bit more of an effective way to get certain issues out there, but I'll still be around until I can figure out what to do with the channel. But I want you guys to make a point of subscribing to me on Minds. That's at Chef Leopard. And you can also join my Civil Liberties Forum here. If you're subscribed to me already here and you're not getting the notifications, there's nothing you can do more besides go to Minds and subscribe, or simply subscribe on BitChute, where the videos will probably be published a little later than on YouTube. So what I produced last week or the week before that concerning the big tent in the Democratic Party is becoming more and more true every day. And I'm not the only person talking about it. You have Tim Pool talking about it. You have people of all stripes discussing how the Democrats can't keep together this coalition of completely divergent organizations and belief systems. So the main theme right now is that a house divided against itself cannot stand, as I believe President Lincoln said prior to the Civil War. And this is a story I did broach on Friday. It said Bernie Sanders campaigned for the Socialist Workers' Party in the 1980 and 1984 presidential campaigns and was investigated by the FBI for his ties to the Marxist group. Sanders has always played down the extent of his involvement with the party, which included radicals who praised the Soviet Union and Cuban communists, and has denied ever being a member. Asked in 1988 about his role as an SWP elector in 1980, he said, "I was asked to put my name on the ballot, and I did. That's true." In fact, his ties to the party are deep and enduring. So this is a game that Bernie Sanders has been playing for years. And if you've been following this channel and following the things that I've written for Hard News Network, and not only for Hard News Network, on my own blogs or on Minds, I don't like Bernie Sanders at all. That's putting it lightly. I've said a lot of negative things about him. That being said, when there's things that come out about him that I think are false and defamatory and libelous, I don't go along with it, because I think if you spread lies, even against a person that is, in your mind, wicked and evil, eventually you get stuck with the same taint that they do. There's no way to promote a good cause through just complete deception. It's just not the way I look at the world. I could be wrong. I don't know what you guys think. You can put that in the comments. The 2020 Democratic presidential primary candidate and United States Senator from Vermont, now 77, often scoffs at comparisons between his brand of self-described democratic socialism and communism. In recent years, he has said he is merely interested in having the United States look more like Sweden, a social democracy with a broad welfare state but a well-functioning private sector. So this is another way that Bernie Sanders skirts the issues. So, before I go on, so talking about Sweden. We'll get to Sweden in a second. What he said earlier was that he was not a member of the SWP, the Socialist Workers' Party. This is a line that he uses all the time. Bernie Sanders likes to say that he's an independent and that he's not working for the Democrats. And then, when he's running for president, he registers as a Democrat in order to qualify for the nomination. And then when he loses, as he did in 2016, and as could happen again this year, he disaffiliates and re-registers as an independent. But in any case, the Democrats endorse him when he runs for Senate. The Democratic Party ends up yielding its nomination to him when he runs for Senate. So in essence, what difference does it make whether he affiliates officially or formally with the Democratic Party or not. It's more as if he's got some sort of alliance with them. And yes, an alliance and a direct membership are not the same thing, but it's still an affiliation. And here, with this example, with the SWP, you have the opposite direction, but it's the same thing. Bernie Sanders wants to pretend that he can be completely disaffiliated and independent of a party while serving as elector for it. And being an elector for a party essentially means that you're taking part in an internal process of it. So somebody who's not a party member, who's taking part in an internal process for it, that is in some ways an affiliation. That's like saying that you can be a Mason without being initiated. It doesn't make any sense. Therefore, being a Mason would have no value. Okay, don't look at it in a moral or ethical sense. Look at it from a logical standpoint. If you're taking part in something, you're part of something. You can't say that you were playing tackle football all day and you were catching passes and, kicking punts or whatever, but then you say, well, in reality, I was trying to play polo and everybody else was playing football. It's just that I was, going along with the program. It doesn't work that way. But his personal files from his time as mayor of Burlington from 1981 to 1989, archived at the University of Vermont, showed that he supported and campaigned for the communist SWP and maintained a close relationship with its senior members. While Democrats campaigned for President Jimmy Carter in 1980 and Walter Mondale in 1984, Sanders spent the Reagan era supporting fringe Marxists with no chance of reaching the White House. In 1980, Sanders proudly endorsed and supported Andrew Pulley, the party's presidential candidate, who once said American soldiers should take up their guns and shoot their officers. Sanders was one of 3 electors for Pulley on the Vermont ballot, stating in a press release, "I fully support the SWP's continued defense of the Cuban Revolution." So, to put that into context, the late 80s, especially the Carter era, Cuba had, what they had just done? Because of Carter's call for Cuba to allow free migration of refugees from the island, Castro emptied the prisons, and he let loose all of the what were termed undesirables in Cuba: mentally ill people, convicted criminals, various like sexual deviants, and also like regular gay people. He emptied the prisons and sent them to the United States in the Mariel boat lift, and the Marielitos, as they were known, became a major symbol of Carter's incompetence. But I guess you could say it was Castro's genius move. But when you think about it, at that time, Castro was taking advantage of America's willingness to take in these Cuban refugees who, they did not want to stay in Cuba. And I think it was 1 in every 5 Marielitos was one of these undesirables, a prisoner, some sort of mentally ill person or whatever. So, yes, this was a very odd time to be supporting the Cuban Revolution. Of course, when you think about somebody like Bernie Sanders, it's not that hard to imagine them supporting the Cuban government at the time. 4 years later, he backed and campaigned for the SWP presidential nominee Mel Mason, a former Black Panther, saying it was important for there to be alternatives to capitalist ideology. Campaign, Mason praised the Russian and Chinese revolutions and said, "The greatest example of a socialist government is Cuba, and Nicaragua is right behind, but it's still developing." I think Bernie was pretty much in the camp with us and other socialist organizations. Mason told the Washington Examiner in an interview, "We talked regularly, and he also said that if I ever made it to Burlington, he was going to give me a key to the city." But Mason, 75, now a psychotherapist and former NAACP official living in California, indicated that after the 1980s, he and Sanders had drifted apart, and Sanders began touting insufficiently radical policies. "We had a long-distance relationship, but that kind of changed after he ran for Congress. I didn't have as much contact anymore. I have a lot of respect for him, but I just don't think the programs he put forward are what workers need in this country," Mason said. we were calling for the formation of an independent revolutionary labor party. We felt that it was necessary for workers in this country to enact a revolution. During Pulley's White House run in 1980, he called for the abolition of the U.S. military and the nationalization of virtually all private industry, as well as the abolition of the military budget and the establishment of official solidarity with the revolutionary regimes in Iran, Nicaragua, Grenada, and Cuba, according to the New York Times report at the time. So maybe we'll explore the rest of this a different time. It is a pretty long article, and I touched on it on Friday. But I want you to understand that Grenada, for example, was a country that had just undergone a Marxist revolution, and 3 years later, that Marxist revolution would melt down, and the initial leader, Maurice Bishop, would be murdered by some of the other members of the organization. It's in the book Banana Wars that I have. Yeah, the Grenada Revolution was something that at the time was a very murky situation. Now, I guess technically you don't have to oppose the Grenada Revolution, but people should understand who they're supporting first and foremost. And yeah, by 1983 it had gone sour, and eventually it turned into bloodshed, and yeah, the U.S. invaded unjustly, as it turns out. So this is just one example of the schism that's enveloping the Democratic Party here in 2019, going into the 2020 election. Another one would be this video from the Democratic Convention in California, which we're going to touch on today a little deeper. You have here John Hickenlooper, the former governor of Colorado, speaking before the convention, and listen to what he says concerning the ideas of socialism.
But let me be clear. If we want to beat Donald Trump and achieve big progressive goals, socialism is not the answer. I was reelected in a purple state in 2014, one of the worst years for Democrats in a quarter century. If we're not careful, we're going to end up helping to re-elect the worst president in American history. I was one of only 2 Democrats.
So that's a very interesting clip, and I think there's people process that depending on where you stand. This is shared by Dave Weigel from the Washington Post. And I think people should really meditate on what this really means. Should the Democratic Party pursue socialism openly? It's a good question. It's a good question because in most countries, if we're being fair, there is a major socialist party. It happens to be that in some countries, socialism is on the decline. You could probably look at Germany as the main. Socialism as an ideology is on the decline. The German Social Democratic Party is doing worse than it ever did. Of course, some of that slack is being picked up by parties even further to the left on the spectrum, like the Left Party. But other parts of it are being, they're swinging steadily to the right. East Germany is now being dominated by the Alternative for Germany, which is a distinctly right-wing populist group. Okay, you look at the UK, you see a lot of the Labour country is flowing over to the Brexit party. So people have to understand that, yes, there is a place in a country that believes in liberal democracy for ideas, even ideas that in the minds of myself, for example, socialism is an illiberal philosophy. It's a philosophy that discourages freedom of thought. I don't care if people want to call themselves libertarian socialists. I believe ultimately libertarian socialists end up getting decimated by authoritarian colleagues of theirs. It's never worked out that libertarian socialists have been able to maintain their form of the ideology in a real situation where they're in charge. Besides that, at the convention, there apparently was or not just at the convention, but in California, there was a split concerning the labor movement in California. So actual laborers, actual people who belong to unions, are rejecting the Green New Deal. And this isn't surprising. I think, my dad's a union member. My brother's a union member. My brother actually works in a union. They're both basically, I'll try to be as vague as possible. They both work in some sort of transit. So, neither of them really get helped. But in fact, they would, my dad's not going to be working for very much longer, but they would both be screwed if the Green New Deal was put into place, because it's all about fossil fuels. So it says here, blue-collar union workers in solidly Democratic California are rejecting Green New Deal politics, a possible preview of troubles for 2020 presidential hopefuls in Rust Belt states like Pennsylvania and Ohio. When Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti launched his Green New Deal LA plan last month amid cheers from environmentalists, hundreds of jeans-wearing tattooed union members outside the event chanted, "Garcetti's got to go," and denounced the move as a betrayal. The Garcetti protest was followed by disputes in the state capitol this month over a large buffer zone that would block new oil and gas wells, as well as a massive hydro project near Joshua Tree. Robbie Hunter, president of the state Building and Construction Trades Council, which represents more than 400,000 workers, said that dozens of his members plan a major blue-collar revolutions demonstration Saturday morning at the California Democratic Party convention in California, which will be attended by 14 of the Democratic presidential contenders and 5,000 delegates and guests. So 14, I think, is a little more than half of the potential nominees. The effort aims to send a message that the party is in danger of eroding a critical base if it continues to back the Green New Deal resolution being pushed in Washington, D.C. by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York and her allies. Hunter argues the measure's goals could endanger thousands of jobs in the Southern California oil industry alone. So people have to remember that oil country in the United States, first of all, there is shale oil areas here in Ohio, for example. There's a lot of parts of the state that, the oil is coming from fracking, which obviously if you're a progressive, you're very much against. But in California, it's also pretty big. In Texas, it's huge in the Houston area. You could also say that in San Francisco, it's been pretty big in the past. The Gulf of Mexico area beyond Houston, there's also, significant reserves, and then there's Alaska. But Southern California, specifically, I think the Fresno area has a lot of oil wells, and also I think in the San Francisco Bay Area, there used to be a lot of it. Although I'm not quite sure how strong of an industry it is now, because I don't know if the reserves are as big as they are elsewhere. All it does is do what the Democratic Party seems to be very good at lately, which is export our jobs while doing nothing for the end game, which is the environmental, Hunter said. And California labor forces this weekend are also expected to also put their clout behind Rusty Hicks, who heads the Los Angeles, what a name, who heads the Los Angeles Labor Federation, a candidate in a contentious race to chair the California Democratic Party. Hicks has signaled labor's concerns by signing a letter opposing a move to ban a hazardous acid from refineries, saying it will lead to the loss of tens of thousands of jobs for local people and cost our region millions of dollars in inactivity. We cannot dismiss these jobs or look at the women as expendable, because they are not. Yeah, that's a strange issue, and I don't know which side to support there, because obviously I don't want people to get workplace poisoning. I'm assuming because he said women, it might lead to pregnancy complications or something. But then again, you can't assume that anymore, because men can get pregnant too. The Green New Deal may be the darling of the Democratic Party, but it really divides the Democrats on a fault line, which is more of the elites against the working class Democrats who are concerned about losing their jobs, said Jessica Levinson, a member of the Los Angeles Ethics Commission. and a professor who teaches politics and ethics at Loyola Law School. Lifelong union members don't necessarily want to be retrained for other greener work spots, nor is it even possible, said Levinson. She predicts with the 2020 election looming, Democratic leaders will have to wrestle with the fact that, unlike the Mueller report and impeachment and indictment, people vote on whether or not they're going to lose their job. So yeah, that's this. It's the same issue. By the way, it's the same reason why I oppose Medicare for all. You know, the industry that I've been working in, the medical devices industry, would be decimated by it because simply most of these hospitals, if they were dependent on the state-run, uncapped cost, that the costs are uncapped, and there'd be so much waste from the Medicare for all that they would never purchase medical devices because there wouldn't be any money left, because most of the money would be going to treating, in many cases, frivolous illnesses. Yes, I'm not trying to say that there's nobody who is shit out of luck because they don't have insurance now without having Medicare for all. But once you give Medicare for all, you start to include within the purview of the program many illnesses that don't necessarily count as illnesses, elective surgeries, things that, cosmetic surgery even potentially. So you have to be wary of it. People should be careful of what they wish for. While there's no chance that President Donald Trump will take California, pushing too far on the Green New Deal would make it difficult for Democrats to recapture crucial Western states like Colorado and Nevada, both won by Hillary Clinton in 2016. That would certainly be an issue in states like Pennsylvania, said Jack Pitney, a veteran California political analyst and political science professor at Claremont McKenna College. He says there's a cautionary tale for Democrats who should remember that West Virginia until 2000 was considered solidly blue. Republican strategist Karl Rove, working for candidate George W. Bush, pushed the fact that the Democratic nominee was Al Gore, author of Earth in the Balance, a fact that didn't sit well with coal miners. So yeah, there's a lot of issues here. So here we're talking about the labor-green split. Earlier we were talking between Bernie Sanders and John Hickenlooper, kind of this ideological split between, more socialistic idea. Bernie Sanders sometimes objects to being called an outright socialist. I think it's ridiculous that he can deny it. And then versus John Hickenlooper, who opposes socialism. And finally, at the Democratic Convention, this is an issue that it baffles me somehow. There's just too much focus on this issue, but we can't just ignore it because the fact is that it keeps coming up at these conventions. So the California Democrats suggest Israel was tied to a 2018 Pittsburgh synagogue attack ahead of I believe this was later. I found reports that these resolutions were not held, or they at least were, they were suggested, and then eventually they were modified or amended to reduce the language. But it says here, according to Fox News, the resolution also claims the 2018 shooting at a Pittsburgh synagogue was the culmination of an alarming reemergence of virulent anti-Semitism of the sort in which these groups allegedly rooted, meaning alt-right groups. So it says the resolution claims that the Israeli government is welcoming support from Christian fundamentalist groups, and in so doing is aligning with Islamophobia while ignoring how such groups display deeply rooted anti-Semitism. So then the next paragraph says, according to Fox, the resolution also claims the 2018 shooting at a Pittsburgh synagogue was a culmination of an alarming reemergence of virulent anti-Semitism of the sort in which these groups allegedly rooted. So I want to say something, and this is from personal experience. This is from my personal encounters with both people on the Christian right and people on what I would call the white nationalist right. There's very little similarity between the two. Yes, some of the people on the alt-right consider themselves deeply Christian, but others consider themselves pagan, which is completely contrary to, obviously, Christian ideology. And then when you talk about these Christian Zionists, in many cases, they go above and beyond the ideology of Jewish Zionists. In many cases, they don't want any compromise with the Palestinians. They are virulently supporting the Jews in Israel. And, yes, there are elements of them that seem to believe in this replacement ideology and the belief that the Jews, once they arrive in the land of Israel, there will be the Armageddon and then the battle at Megiddo, and finally Christ will come back to the world, and there will be the redemption and the rapture and all of that, which, I'm not exactly, I'm paraphrasing it obviously, but look, it is what it is. I don't think that those two are really connected almost at all. It's almost it's the same thing that they try to do all the time with people who have, like these incels, for example. They try to connect them to a lot of these shootings, or they like to do the same thing to, for example, Prime Minister Modi over in India all the time now. I'm seeing, I would have done another thing today about him, because now there's just all the time stuff about Narendra Modi, as if people who are these Western leftists, they can tell all these Indians who to vote for. Look, I don't know anything. I don't know why people are voting for Modi necessarily. I know a little bit because I know people like Arjun and some people from that I've encountered, outside of YouTube, that they tell me, Modi represents the true India, the India that's never been told about. So why is it that these people who work for networks, including TYT, they see fit to criticize a person, a foreign leader, a man who has been just reelected by almost acclamation? Why do they care so much? I mean, it's like, just let's live with it. Let's deal with it. Let's let this guy, take office. But no, they conflate him with the alt-right. They conflate him with Islamophobia. And that's really what I see from the left. And this is something that people are taking. This is from the Jerusalem Post, but it's something that's been taken notice of by this is Susan Crabtree, who, I don't know whether she's Jewish or not, but it's not something that only Jews and Palestinians are taking notice of within the Democratic Party. It's something that people are noticing. The Democratic Party is being riven by a conflict between people who are still very sympathetic to Israel, people who might be connected to AIPAC, whether you like them or not, or maybe they're actually themselves Israeli Americans, or whether they are sympathetic in that they may have commercial connections to Israel, whatever the motivation. I'm not trying to impugn the motivation or say the motivation is good or bad. But there are pro-Israel people remaining in the Democratic Party, and then there's anti-Israel people in the Democratic Party, people who may be either anti-war or they may be just simply critical of Benjamin Netanyahu. And yes, there are people who are anti-Israel simply because they have deep-seated ideological opposition to the country and possibly even to Jews themselves. Okay, I think that there is room to entertain all of those possibilities. I'm not a person who just generalizes with everybody, because I've met all sorts of people. It says the party's resolutions committee on Friday evening will consider the 5 draft resolutions among roughly 200 in total authored by convention delegates. The panel could try to table the ones dealing with Israel to avoid a dramatic public floor debate over the weekend. Drew Hamill, spokesman for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, declined to comment on the resolutions while they remain pending. State Party spokesman Roger Salazar was equally reticent. We are not going to comment on resolutions that at this point have neither been debated, finalized, or passed, he told Real Clear Politics. So, to my understanding, the resolutions were kind of modified, but that's not the point. The point is that, like I said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Okay? You can't be for something and against something at the same time. You can't be for socialism and capitalism at the same time. You can't be for the Green New Deal and also pro-labor at the same time, when so much of that labor is concerned with the auto industry or with, mining and petroleum interests. And you can't be pro-Israel and pro-Palestine at the same time, at least not in our time. So that's about it. I hope that you enjoyed this morning's video, and there might be another video coming up this afternoon if I can put it together, probably a similar topic concerning the United Kingdom. But that's it for now. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also, subscribe to me on Minds. Subscribe to me on Minds already and join the forum. I will add you to the forum if you want. And also on BitChute at Chef Leopard. That video should be going public pretty soon. And on Gab at Starscream85 if you want to donate some money. Find me on Subscribestar. Chef Leopard is my name as well. And have a great Monday.